A very good morning to you, and many thanks for joining us on yet another edition of Political Spectrum. We're coming to you live on Spectrum Television. Hello from me, I am Raymond Eta. Of course, it's the weekend edition of the show, and invariably, it's the last edition for the year 2022. Still keeping up with our task and responsibility of keeping you abreast with the latest political developments as it concerns 2023. A lot has happened this year, and we'll be reviewing the course of the political space in 2022, especially here in the Akwa State, which has climaxed with the one big story that's been going on around town in the last few hours, and that's reactions that have trailed the release of the gubernatorial candidate of the Young Progressives Party ahead of the 2023 general elections, distinguished Senator Obambasi Albert. But the big story of the day has to do with the gubernatorial candidate of the Young Progressives Party, YPP, in the Akwa State, distinguished Senator Obambasi Albert, who was granted bail by a high court in Rivers State yesterday after he was initially sentenced to 42 years in prison for corruption charges. Well, Mr. Albert, of course, as we know it, was the candidate of the party after defecting from the People's Democratic Party, where he has served in different forums, first as Commissioner for Finance, before, of course, going to the Red Chambers in 2015, where he has been serving as a senator. But he was fingered in a corruption scandal dating back to 2014, as investigated by the EFCC for allegedly receiving gifts by way of vehicles that amounted to 204 million naira. Whether or not this would hamper his chances of being on the ballot for next year's polls is what is left to be seen. But let's get keener perspectives on the intricacies surrounding the latest ruling from the Court of Appeal in Port Harcourt. So first off, we should note that he has been granted bail on a sick leave. So we've not had much information as to what the bail conditions are, except for the fact that we know he was granted bail on health grounds. There were speculations that distinguished Senator Albert has been ill while in detention, and so his lawyers had actually queried why he should remain there when he can actually continue his sentencing elsewhere. So the bail that's been granted to him clearly are on health grounds. However, there's been widespread, backlash from the supporters of distinguished Senator Albert and those of some other political opponents here in the state who lambasted supporters of the YPP for tripping out to disrupt what they called the peace of the state. We saw some sort of carnival atmosphere within the afternoon and the late hours in the state capital, Uyo, with supporters of the YPP tripping out to the streets to celebrate the news of the release of distinguished Senator Bassi Albert. But others have called for calm because it looks like a lot of the supporters of the party do not really have a keen understanding on the nature of his release. Well, many were expecting Senator Albert to turn up at his campaign ground in Ifa, where he usually hosts a large number of his supporters in the course of campaigning. But that did not happen. And from the information, some persons went home disappointed because they were hoping to see Senator Albert turn up, at least for confirmation that, yes, he has been released. But we can authoritatively say that, yes, he has been released after, of course, being granted bail on health grounds by the Court of Appeal in Port Harcourt. However, let's be very critical again of the information that is going out in the public as to the conditions that have been set for his bail release. We do not have verified information on this yet. And as a matter of fact, there were no pronouncements on this from the court proceedings. As soon as we have that, we'll do well to let you know. And from further information on this, we've been told that Mr. Albert has been taken to the University of Uyo Teaching Hospital for a checkup after his health reportedly deteriorated while serving his prison terms at the Ikorekmene Custodial center. Well, it's a good news, some would say, for supporters of the party who had been left in the dark about the ambitions of their gubernatorial candidates going into next year's polls. Well, these are the stories we'll be getting first and feelers on, as we'll be linking up with Comrade Ekemini David in a short while to bear his thoughts on this issue. He, of course, has been tracking the activities of the Young Progressives Party since their gubernatorial campaign trail kicked off. So we get first-hand feelers from him on the word around the camp of the YPP and the Akwabo Obasi campaign train, with reactions trailing the news of the release of Senator Obambasi Albert yesterday. That will be when we come back from this break. Do all to stay with us. Burning Issues is up next. Welcome back, and many thanks for staying with us. You're still watching Political Spectrum with me, Raymond Ater. Let's get straight to the first big story of the day, as previewed earlier, which is the news surrounding the release of the gubernatorial candidate of the Young Progressives Party, YPP, ahead of the 2023 governorship elections in Akwa Ibom State. Distinguished Senator Basi Albert, who, courtesy of a ruling by the Court of Appeal in Port Harcourt, was granted bail on health grounds after being initially indicted and imprisoned for 42 years following another High Court judgment in Uyo. Joining us live and over the line is someone who knows very well the inner workings of the Young Progressives Party, especially here in the States. Comrade Ekemini David is no stranger to Political Spectrum. Good morning to you. Many thanks for joining us yet again.
Thank you, my brother Raymond. Thank you. It's a pleasure joining you.
It's a pleasure to have you join us as well. Let's get straight to it quickly. There was some sort of fanfare and a carnival mood on the streets of Uyo and some parts of the state, if you like, following the news that broke out yesterday that Senator Basi Albert has been released from the Ikodakbene Correctional Center after a Court of Appeal in Port Harcourt granted him bail on health grounds. Before we come to the reactions that have trailed his release, especially from political opponents in the state, some of whom criticized the YPP for, in their own words, disrupting the peace of the state by going out to celebrate in large numbers the news of the release of Senator Albert. First off, what's your take first on his release, and then the reactions that you saw on the streets and the fanfare that followed yesterday?
Okay, so first is that the distinguished Senator Marcy Albert clearly has proven that he is the choice of Akwa Ibom people. Even before he was released yesterday, very formally, and then the Akwa Ibom people got to see him. You would notice that for the 27 days he was in prison, Akwa Ibom people had consistently engaged in prayer, social media advocacies. Most Akwa Ibom young persons even went on advocacy walks, But then, these were all strong indicators that a people's man was actually unduly, illegally, legitimately incarcerated. And you understand, and it was a major concern to the people. But then, in all of these things, another strong proof was that the gentleman was entirely innocent of whatever he was accused of. We saw that evidence in the energy of his campaign organization and, of course, the focus of the party. The party went ahead with the campaign. Nobody was distracted. Everybody was very much focused. Of course, we can also have a strong pointer, from his wife, who was all around and about going through running the campaigns and visiting those she had to visit to make sure that the campaigns were still very much facilitated and sustained. Now, if this was someone who was truly guilty of what he was accused of, you will understand that, of course, everybody would have been weak. The people he was working with would have been weak. His wife is a pastor, and of course, she would have shown some sort of weaknesses and all of that, in carrying on with the things he did prior to the times before he was incarcerated. So for me, that he was out yesterday, of course, his release is a strong pointer that number one, he is the people's man. Number two, he is truly loved by Akwa people. Number three, that distinguished Senator Marcy Albert is one with a very clear-cut, clear mind. Of course, the fantasy we saw yesterday generally is just a clear proof that the gentleman is clearly loved. And I think it is a strong pointer to the position to note that Akwa Ibom people are beginning to take a very strong stance on who they want to choose as their next governor come 2023.
Well, enjoys public support, considerable ones at that, notwithstanding. But there are some persons who seem to be slightly miffed by the news that Senator Albert was released yesterday, and were not so comfortable with the fact that people trooped out to the streets to celebrate his release on bail. One of them is an aide to the Akwa Ibom State Governor, Reverend Richard Peters, courtesy of a post he made on his official Facebook page. He described the jubilations on the street yesterday as recklessness, a noise, hullabaloo, and obstruction of traffic around the streets of Uyo, and also described it as a violent, misfired energy by supporters of the YPP. What's your response to these claims? When people say the number of things, they say, number one, those things meet me quite ridiculously, because these are just kings from the opposition trying to disarm or trying to make the actions of the party, the Young Progressive Party, which I belong to, look insignificant. We have people who go out on the streets, who move on the streets in celebration of carnivals, not once, not twice. The government has actually convened or hosted carnivals, and people went on the streets. A good number of persons, a great population went on the streets of Uyo. Serious traffic was caused. There are certain public marches convened by the wife of the governor on the gender-based things. People go on the streets, they walk on the streets, they stop traffic and all of that. Now, yesterday, a group of people who love a certain man, quite passionate about the man's cause, of course, in their way to show that they are very grateful, to God for the release of their principal, and in a way to also show their principal the dimension of love towards him, went on the street peacefully. Nobody was killed, nobody was injured, nobody was stampeded, even with the crowd. Nobody's thing was stolen. No car was taken away. Nobody had any accident. Peacefully, they went on the street, dancing and jubilating. What about the claims? What about the claims of obstruction of vehicular and traffic movements in the course of the night by Reverend Richard Peters? And in his own words, he's claiming that the so-called triumphant entry or celebration of the return of Oba was not needed, because in his own words, it should have been a sober return where the YPP candidate should have actually come out to apologize to people, because according to him, he let down or betrayed their trust.
I don't understand what the statement is trying to say, because to be very honest with you, I would want to be very civil in this conversation. I wouldn't love to mention his name just the way you have mentioned, because I don't want to accord him such relevance. I try as much as possible to be very mindful of the kinds of persons that engage in conversations like this. When he says the distinguished senator had let down the trust of people or had betrayed the trust of people, I think it is unintelligent not to prove how he had betrayed the trust of the people. But on a second note, talking about crossing traffic at night, as a result of Oba's release following the celebration of the people. Let me quickly say here, we have government officials who go on convoy at night, at the dark of the night. People are supposed to be hurrying to their respective houses, and these government officials drive with their long convoys at the middle of the night, get stopped in the convoy, and people will have to wait for a very long time for these convoys to pass before they also pass. I want to also ask, is that not a threat? Not a threat to traffic at night? These things happen. So you will realize, and you will also have to agree with me, that these are schemes of the opposition to make a very loud outing yesterday, the loud celebration, and of course, the clear cuts prove that Akwa Ibom people are very much in love with the the personality of Basia, but the opposition is trying to make it look insignificant. And of course, it is not meeting a successful ground, because for every time they try predicting that, it keeps failing. So that's my point. So you should leave the ceremony you mentioned alone. We cannot accord him such relevance. He has not been able to prove how Basia has betrayed the trust of Akwa Ibom people. How did he betray the trust of Akwa Ibom people? By funding over 480 students through school, having 40 of them become first-class graduates. How did he betray the trust of Akwa Ibom people? By becoming the only senator and public office holder who was able to use the funds allocated to him as a senator to perfect the thing he was supposed to do for his constituents. How was he able to betray the trust of the people after Basia Albert has done virtually everything he was supposed to have done as a senator? How was he able to betray the trust of the people when he was the chairman of the state ministerial direct labor project in this state? Every significant project done by the federal government was handled by that certain man alone. He handled it, he supervised it, and made it come true. How did he betray the trust of Akwa Ibom people? So I think you should not engage the perspective of such a man, because of course you will always agree with me that he's one person that does not get his points very clear. So I cannot his points are always very much unintelligible. Thank you.
Well, interestingly, from the information available to us, and I did mention earlier that Senator Albert was released on health grounds, was granted bail on health grounds, which means the underlying issues surrounding his initial conviction are still there, and we expect this case to perhaps continue until maybe the apex court in the country, being the Supreme Court. And the elections are just around the corner. These were the concerns a lot of his supporters had when the first story broke out that he has been jailed for 42 years. Well, you rightly put it, his wife and several other members of his campaign team have continued with the campaigning and the politicking, inundating voters that he is still very much in the race. But with the news that his health actually deteriorated while at the Kodokbene Correctional Center, and as I've said, the fact that the case is still ongoing, are there optimism that Senator Oba would likely be on the ballot, or would his travails hamper the possibility of him going ahead with next year's elections, as his supporters are widely expecting?
So first of all, let me mention here clearly, distinguished Senator Basia Albert has stood for the primary elections, the nominations in his party, the Young Progressive Party. He won the ticket. He was given the flag of the party. He began his campaigns. The INEC official list came out, and his name was included on the official list as the candidate and flag bearer for gubernatorial of the Young Progressive Party in Akwa Ibom State. What else do we want to validate or to prove to us that one is the candidate of his party and will be on the ballot and will be standing elections? That is one thing I want to put it out to everybody to understand clearly. The thing is that let us assume INEC didn't clear him. let us assume he never even won the party ticket. Let us assume he had cases surrounding the fact that his name should or shouldn't be on the INEC list. Then we would have been talking about uncertainties about him standing election. But as long as none of those things have happened, I want to put it clear to the entire public that the distinguished Senator Basi Albert is going to be standing elections as governor, from governor come March 2023.
Well, not meaning to cut you short, not cutting you short here, but again, still based on information, the reports we got from the court did not state the bail conditions that Soto is released, except for the fact that he was released on health grounds. So we don't know if there's any time frame where he will likely either be returned to jail or perhaps allowed to continue with his campaign. So the argument here is, would the court case not hamper his preparations for next year's election?
Let me clear that quickly. That he was released on health grounds, according to you, that the court had said that he was released on health grounds. Meaning on your own side that there's a likelihood that he would have to be returned to jail. Well, that's not an exactly true question. I mean, that's not an exactly true position. Of course, you expect people to always say those things. You expect the courts to always bring those reasons and all of that. The most important thing that Akwa Ibom people are interested in now, and the most important reality, that the distinguished Senator Basi Albert is out of prison. That is one thing we've got to accept. So whether it's on health grounds or not, the gentleman is out. And we can put it to you that every process leading to the campaign, leading to the electioneering in March 2023, will take on fully whatever thing that has to do with the court. Trust me, the Young Progressive Party and the Core as a campaign organization have the best of legal brains. And of course, duly, the campaign council, the party, legal system or the legal unit of the party and the campaign council will handle everything that they have to handle. But one of the things you have to know for the truth, that the distinguished Senator Basi Albert is very much focused. And whatever he's accused of, I tell you, he's not guilty of it. And the gentleman is going to be very focused to driving his campaign, and of course, emerging as governor of Akwa Ibom State come next year.
Interestingly, and as you've said, of course, despite his incarceration, his campaign team have continued with the work of taking the message of the YPP and its candidates to the people through your door-to-door campaigns. How far do you think these messages have gone to inundate the people that they have visited across the states, that the YPP can indeed pull off an upset in the March 10 gubernatorial elections in the state?
Okay, so please take that again. I think I didn't get you clearly.
All right. So as you've said before, in spite of the fact that he has been incarcerated for a while, the members of the Akwa Ibom campaign team have still continued with the YPP's tradition of a door-to-door campaigning, hoping to win over voters and supporters ahead of next year's election. So the question is there confidence that the YPP, not just because Senator Basi Albert is the candidate of the party or because of the troubles he has faced recently, which many people say or claim would give him sympathy vote, is there large spread confidence that the YPP can pull off an upset in the March 10 gubernatorial elections next year?
Well, let me begin from here. The Young Progressive Party in Akwa Ibom State is one that is a party that is a product of successive experiences. What I mean is that the party did not begin today to gather the experience needed to get or to earn the needed support it needs, or it should ordinarily have to prevail in a major election as that of the March 10th. That's one. An addition to that feat is the presence of the distinguished Senator Basi Albert as a flag bearer of the party. His social capital, his political excellence, and of course, his public decency as regards the discharge of his duty as a public officer are all grounds and premises to prove that truly, adding to the strength of the party is on sure grounds to be able to command the needed support, the needed votes to succeed in the March 10th election. Distinguished Senator Basi Albert, in his personality, which you have all said, It's not one person that is going around telling, arranging people, strategizing people, who will be running around in polling units and doing all whatnot against the electoral practices. The gentleman is consistently engaging with the list of persons at the unit. If you were privileged to have been in his last public gathering, he had mentioned that nobody should come with him, and he wants to go alone with a few persons to the unit. If you are a unit coordinator, a ward coordinator, a church chairman, a state executive, a supporter of him, go back to your unit, go back to your ward, wait for him, he'll come there. Let me put it to you. The unit-to-unit and door-to-door campaign that is almost becoming very prevalent in Akwa Ibom politics today is particularly initiated by the distinguished Senator Albert Apple. Because he started it, he knew that this is the best means to get to the list of the common persons at the grassroots. The other parties began to do it. So, what I can always tell you is that distinguished Senator Albert is working in a new generation party that has gathered experience over the years. And he, as a person, is a gentleman that has facilitated the excellent emergence of many political office holders and governors in this state. Meaning, he is a capital resource person when it has to do with victories at the polls. Let me remind you, in 2007, Pastor Albert was very instrumental to the emergence of the then distinguished Senator Okotie Party, the former governor of the state. He was very instrumental. It is as a result of his instrumentality that he was able to become the commissioner of a very vital administrative ministry in this state, the Ministry of Finance, the Commission of Finance. He was very instrumental to the emergence of the sitting government in 2015 and in 2019. The very reason he was well guarded, well respected, even up until date, by the top political actors in this state. If there is anybody that is acting against the distinguished Senator Albert, it is as a result of political enmity, as a result that is springing from the feeling of inferiority, that he is too superior. And the other opposition is beginning to be very, beginning to feel so inferior about it. So for me, I have been able to state to you, number one, he is in an experienced party. Number two, he is an experienced person that has aided and facilitated the emergence of top political office holders over the years. Number three, this is someone who is running a well-organized campaign organization, a well-organized party that is very much focused in making sure that the impact of campaigns and the impact of the electioneering process gets to the list of the common persons at the wards of the unit. What more do you need to be able to generate the best of support from people? Let us take the party vote aside. The distinguished Senator Basi Albert, a former Obasi, and the YPP is extremely working, and they deserve support.
That's quite interesting. Let's wrap up this particular argument. Again, still following up on the diverse reaction that trailed yesterday's news. Someone has also suggested that the YPP should make use of the available window created by the Electoral Act to replace Senator Basi Albert as the candidate of the YPP ahead of next year's elections, because they believe he may not likely scale through the travails that he is facing. You've already said and dismissed such claims earlier on, but I'm touching on that as a last line because these are still the concerns most persons have. Just yesterday, I had a lot of persons reaching out to say, if the distinguished senator has been released, why didn't he turn up at the campaign ground to, see his supporters who had tripped out in large numbers with expectations that they were going to see him? Well, perhaps he must have had his reasons for not doing so. But if these clarifications are not made, then even his core supporters may have fears that he may not be on the ballot next year. So are there any possibility of, considering replacing him on the ballot, as some have said, utilize the window available because the court case he had may stop him from being on the ballot?
Raymond, I would want you to get that question. You said he did not come out to each of the campaign grounds. I want you to get it very clear. Hello?
Yeah, hello. Okay, just to reiterate on the question again, there are concerns by some that the fact that the distinguished senator was released yesterday but did not turn up to be received by his supporters who had trooped out in large numbers has led some persons to speculate that maybe, just maybe, the distinguished senator may have been told his campaign activities may have been limited because he still has some cases to answer. So some have said the YPP should utilize the window made available by the Electoral Act to replace Senator Bassi Albert on the ballot. Do you buy into that idea?
Let me handle that. You see, Raymond, like I had earlier told you, the opposition is a crop of people suffering from bad inferiority. I wouldn't want to add complex to it, but it doesn't look so extreme.
Okay.
They're suffering from a very bad inferiority. That's because of the intimidation, the presence of the distinguished senator, is posing generally. It is the people saying that he did not turn up to receive, or he did not turn up to be received by his supporters yesterday. And number one, either people who are very much uninformed, two, people who have decided to lie as a culture, or three, people who are facilitating the schemes of public deception. These are the three sets of people. Because I cannot imagine that someone will have to say that the distinguished senator was not out yesterday to meet with his supporters when the young man was actually the one who drove. They drove him into the crowd in his vehicle, and he came out on his top and his cap, and his supporters saw him. As of yesterday, his recreational facility, he was there with his supporters when they had the solemn session today. So how then do you say the distinguished senator was not there? How do we say this kind of things? This was someone who was live at the place, at the place. People saw him yesterday. And then the pictures were everywhere. People saw the pictures. We saw the crowd. So how then do we make such lies? So I wouldn't want to engage in this question because number one, I would have said it is ridiculous. But then it's insulting. Bassi Albert is not a timid person. Everybody should know it. There is no way the people will begin to lie, or the party will begin to lie, or the campaign organization will begin to lie that he is out. The gentleman was seen yesterday. He showed up his face. He was there at the recreational center yesterday. So when people say he was not there, ask them to show you the proof. I will personally send pictures of his presence to you to see it. So it is ridiculous. It is a scheme to mislead the public. It is evil to have said he was not there. Thank you.
Interesting thoughts indeed. We're going to have to leave it there on that subject. Thanks for bearing your thoughts.